talk about the steps for starting a homeschool. Okay, so we already talked in another video about the legal requirements and filing a notice of intent. If your child is at least 7 years old, or you have children 7 or older, to open a legal homeschool, you file a notice of intent with the State Division of Non-Public Education. But beyond that, so let's talk about some of the steps for getting started. And I'm going to let Tiffany talk a little bit. Tell us about deschooling, because that's something you learned about after you took your kids out of school.
Yes. If somebody had told me this was going to happen, I would have been way more prepared. When I took my daughter out, we loaded her up on curriculum, tried to recreate public school at home, and it did not work out.
So how old was she when she started?
This was her 3rd grade year. We took her out. I forgot how old she was. Well, however old 3rd graders are. And it backfired on me big time. So deschooling is a really important part of, if you're taking your child out of the public education system and bringing them home, something really important to not overlook. They do need a process to adjust and to kind of figure things out. So deschooling is very different than unschooling. So those two terms sometimes get thrown around as being the same thing. They are not. Unschooling is a type of homeschooling, not to get into the weeds on it, where it's just more of a child-led education. They don't typically.
We'll talk about that
another time. So deschooling is just that process of allowing the child to adjust to being at home and your teacher and your mom now. So that's kind of a unique thing. My daughter, I had to keep telling her to stop asking to go to the bathroom. Like, you're at home, you can go to the bathroom. So it's really just, for me, it was a process of getting to know my kids from an educational perspective. Like, I knew who my children were, but when it came to school, like, I don't know how they learn, and you'll just be shocked at what you don't know. Like, we thought she was doing great with math, and then I brought her home, and apparently she wasn't doing great with math. So it's just that time to kind of figure out who your child is as a student, being able to figure out, what their strengths and weaknesses are, how they learn, what do they like, what are they passionate about, and just kind of use that time for you as mom to read, like to learn about homeschooling and learn about what that looks like. Read some great books. I have suggestions that I can link somewhere, but learn about it, like trying to almost detox your own brain from what you expect public school looks this way. Don't try to recreate it at home, because it gets messy and
it's not necessary.
Yes, just enjoy your kid and don't put pressure on them to rush through that process. You'll know when they're ready.
So how long did you deschool for?
My daughter, it took a couple years where we were really trying to get through a lot of that school anxiety. That was something that didn't let up easily. My boys were like a year and they were good. But during that time, you're not just not doing anything. Like, you are still intentional about, learning opportunities. We did math, but we kept it very simple, easy, basic. Again, you made math just kind of a fun thing. But we read a lot. Like, reading out loud to your kids is the best thing you can ever do. Right. It doesn't matter if you don't do anything else except read out loud to your kids. You've done good for the day. Yeah. So, but it took her a while, but she was also a very anxious student. So trying to undo a lot of those things that she had learned, it just took time for her. So
it's kind of individual how long you want to spend in that process.
Yes.
Of easing in.
And it might have gone faster for her had I figured it all out. That, oh wait, there's a thing called deschooling that I was unaware of. So maybe it would have gone faster had I been
not trying to push it at the beginning.
Yeah. So and just being able to create educational opportunities wherever you see them.
So it's something you could technically start before school starts. Like if you're going to start September 6th,
Totally.
Deschooling can really start in the summer before you start homeschooling. I mean,
you could. My kids were in year-round schools, so they were like, summer vacation.
So that depends, right?
They were so excited to have a vacation. So
Well, and I think to go along, the important part of that is for your kids to adjust, but for mom to adjust and to learn.
Yes.
So one of the steps for starting a homeschool is that you have to learn what homeschooling is and give yourself time to research.
Yep.
Right. And all the different things that, what are some of the things that, moms should be looking into and learning about.
Yeah, because most of us didn't homeschool.
Right.
Like we're not, I do think more and more there's a generation of kids coming up who now have kids of their own who do homeschool, but it's still a minority. Most of us who homeschool did not homeschool ourselves. So we don't know what was it like to be teacher mom if you never had one.
And we only know the model. If you went through public school, you know what the public school model is.
Yes, right.
But the fact that there are other ways of doing education, and that there are styles of learning and philosophies of education that might look very different than the public school model, but still be very beneficial for your family.
And I also see that people in a time of stress, and let's be honest, when you first year, you take your kids out and homeschool, it can be stressful. You default to what you know.
Yeah.
And for a lot of us, like you said, I was public school. So you default to, well, what do they do in public school?
Right.
Because that's, it's already done for me. But if that's the case, I should have just left my kid in public school.
Right.
So,
Yeah. So there are a lot of books and websites and blogs and everything that talk about all kinds of. And we're going to do another video where we go into more some of the learning styles and homeschool styles, but also finding out what resources are available in your area. What kinds of things you can be part of, whether it's support groups or co-ops or clubs or different things that are in your local area. Another step, again, before you start, is coming up with a plan of what your homeschool is going to look like, where you're going to do homeschooling. And I know some people like to set up a schoolroom. Does anybody have a schoolroom?
I've tried. We always end up on the couch.
I think most people start with a schoolroom, and then kind of it evolves a little bit. We're not strictly having a schoolroom.
That was us too.
Yeah.
I had a table set up in the den.
Yeah.
And the kids wanted to be wherever I was for the most part, because I had a first grader. My fourth grader, he was okay being by himself. He'd like to go in his room and read to get away from the little, because I also had a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old at the time. So it was kind of crazy. But yes, the couch was the main place we did school at that age. And then the kitchen table or the floor or the
And sometimes what that did for us was we kind of bring up a challenge of keeping up with our school stuff.
Yes.
So it's like, well, I have time to do my reading, but I can't find that book.
That's what the homeschool room is for.
That's right.
To store all your books.
That's right. So we're just having baskets. If you do a lot at the sofa, you have a basket there. That was helpful, I found. At least trying to have some place in different rooms where
I've heard people say, how can you homeschool if you're not organized? And my answer is you'll become more organized by survival.
Yeah, you'll figure out. Right?
And so it comes. It's okay.
Another really great tip for especially if you don't have a schoolroom, you can get them at IKEA or at Michael's. Those little 3-tiered rolling carts. They're for crafts. They work great for books. Yeah, they fit a 3-ring binder in one of those little compartments, and you can wheel it around your house. So you can get creative. Again, you just got to think what works for me. Don't rearrange your entire life and your entire house.
Right.
And don't let that be an obstacle to say, well, I can't homeschool because I don't have a fancy homeschool room in my house.
Yes,
you homeschool wherever your kids are.
Yeah.
In the car works too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
At grandma's house. So, and we added bookshelves over time.
Yes.
So we started with a bookshelf to put some of our books on, but the longer you homeschool, the more things you tend to collect, the more books you tend to have. If you're like me. And so we now have bookshelves in most of the rooms of the house. So, having rooms, what are some other supply kind of things that you think are essential for a new homeschooler?
So it was funny you should say this. So we also started at 3rd grade. I pulled my oldest son out of school at 3rd grade. He's 9 years old. Now he's 19. And the most used homeschool supply I ever bought was a whiteboard with like a wooden edge around it. I think I got a couple of them from the dollar section at Target. And that thing is falling apart. But I kid you not, my 19-year-old had it in his room the other day. I couldn't find it. Making his online summer college class list of like things he had to do this week. And it's just like, it was $1, but it was just, that is one of the most homeschool useful things. And because we could move it around, it wasn't a board on the wall. But I had said, can everyone come in here and I'll write this out. Wherever we were, I had that. I could use it if I needed to. So that was really helpful. And you just use so much less paper doing that. So that was really useful to me. I feel like I use something like that a lot. And some of the games and stuff I spent probably a little bit too much on at the homeschool fair are still in the cabinet, and we never pulled all the pieces out. So that was just one thing for me. But
I know for me, Dollar Tree. You go to Dollar Tree and you can stock up glue sticks. I mean, seriously, I cannot tell you how many glue sticks we go through.
Yeah.
And invest in this is going to sound ridiculous, invest in a good pencil sharpener.
Worth it.
Absolutely.
It is worth it. Let me tell you, no, never again invest in a good pencil sharpener. Preferably not at Dollar Tree.
Yeah.
Like go onto Amazon.
Staples.
And a stapler.
Splurge on
Ooh, and a
important things.
laminator. You can get laminators really cheap on Amazon.
Some people
they make
really,
me happy.
yeah. I never had a laminator. A copy machine was very important to me.
Copy machine, definitely.
I use my copier, my printer copier, because I do take a lot of things off of, I find online and things that I want, or I create documents or games or things and lists, and so I use my copier a lot.
Agreed.
I use a 3-hole punch.
Three-hole
That's
punch.
one of my top things too, because we print off a lot, and then you do want to keep it in binders, so it's not just scattered everywhere. So 3-hole punch.
Binders. One of the tips for multiple children with all these kinds of things is I color coded my kids. So when I was buying school supplies, binders, notebooks, pencil boxes, the milk crates is what we used to carry a lot of, to hold their books. Each child had their color. So if a notebook was on the table, you'd know if it was red, it belonged in Eric's bin. If it was green, it belonged in Alex's bin.
That's a great idea.
So anything that comes in multiple colors, that worked really well for our family with 5 kids. So connecting with other people is another one of the steps I think is important for new homeschoolers. So support groups, finding a local support group. Not everybody likes support groups, but we all belong to the same support group. Lighthouse Christian Homeschool Association, and there are many, many groups like that across the state. And what are some of the things that you found as a benefit of being in a support group? Because everybody uses it for different reasons too. I mean, finds different
that's important
things
to explain. I think it's not like, well, if you join up, you must go to every meeting, you must do this, you must do. It's not that kind of an obligation. It's really like you say, you can choose what you're going to do. Like I went to the monthly meetings more in the first 5 years of homeschooling than I have in the last 5 years, simply because as kids get busier with activities. And I also didn't feel the need for all the training as much after I got experience under my belt. But it's still been wonderful for field trips, for middle school socials. We did a lot this year. And for those benefits, and just making friends myself too, homeschool friends. And I've made those at church and other places that aren't necessarily part of Lighthouse, but I think it's good for people to know you can join and then kind of see how it benefits you.
Yeah.
But there's
and if big support groups aren't your thing, mentors.
Right.
Just even if it's finding one, homeschool mom who's been doing it for a few years, just to, again, sometimes you just feel like you're totally failing and you're messing it up and you're ruining your children and they'll be living in your basement for the rest of your life, their life, and you're screwing them up. And it is a really sanctifying process because, man, it is just hard to educate your kids sometimes.
Yeah.
And you need other homeschool moms who have been there and done that to tell you are doing fine. And just being able to just come together with other homeschool moms who have been doing this for a long time and to enjoy the wisdom and encouragement that they have. Yeah. And then as you go through the years, be able to give back and provide that for other people is just a benefit to have that community. We are designed
Right.
for community. I think more and more now
Yeah.
people are realizing how much humans
Yes.
need each other.
And I think, people have become creative too. You can,
Yeah.
and continuing to find community, even if we can't always meet together.
Definitely.
We're doing things in smaller groups
Right.
and just a few families meeting together until we can do large group things again.
Yeah.
But
I'd make a plug too for having at least some access to a local group. Because I think now with Facebook, like there's NC homeschoolers and that's great.
Mhm.
But you can ask one question on there and get 60 answers from people all over the state or all over the country. You
Yeah.
know, that Facebook is great for crowdsourcing in a way, but you're generally not building relationships where you kind of see it through. You may never speak to those people again or meet them in person. So that's great. But I wouldn't want people to feel like, well, that fills that need. It really
Yeah.
is good to have local
it's nice to have someone who kind of knows your family a little bit.
Right.
Has met your kids,
experience.
kind of
Right.
knows what your experience is. That it's very beneficial to have someone who actually knows your family or has met your kids and, knows how you live and can talk about things that are more personal.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. We're going to talk about some of these things more in depth later, but I think that was a good, so deschooling, taking the time to research into different homeschool styles and learning styles and the local resources that are available to you, creating a plan and a schedule for your family, setting up your space, gathering your supplies, and connecting with other people are probably good steps for starting.
Right.
And
And those are a process too. So, and it can be a process. Like you want to get started, but it's good that you don't feel like, I have to have all my supplies gathered on the first day or else.
Right.
Because you're going to find out there are things that you need that you didn't know you needed
right.
2 weeks in or whatever.
Just start.
Just
Just
start. Right.
Just start, and you'll learn as you go
As you
along.
go, right. It's
Right.
good to have it's really good to have the heads up to
Yeah.
be looking for that. But
Yeah.
and then you find a lot of things on sale too after everyone else has
yeah.
started school, right? You're finding
Yeah.
all your
Yes.
stuff for 50% off.
Yeah.
But you'll figure out what you need along the way.
I
That's good
agree.
base.
I agree.